The last section that I'm going to read is about Edie Windsor, who was, of course, the plaintiff in the Supreme Court case that repealed the part of the Defense of Marriage Act that said that even if a state recognizes same-sex marriage, the federal government doesn't have to. I call this section SCOTUS, that is the Supreme Court of the United States. SCOTUS hears a love story and gets it. In the early 1960s, Portofino, a smoky Italian restaurant near Bleecker Street in Greenwich Village, was where upscale lesbians went for a dinner on Friday nights. When Thea Spire came over to say hello to a friend at the table where Edie Schlane Windsor sat, they were introduced. They had a lot in common, both smart dressers, silver screen glamorous, Spire like the butchy Greta Garbo and Queen Christina, Windsor a Liz Scott, platinum blonde, high-breasted, fuchsia-polished nails. Both were also Jewish, quick-witted, ambitious. Windsor had been married to a man for less than a year before she realized she preferred women and parted with her husband on friendly terms. In 1955, she went back to school at NYU, where she got an MA in applied mathematics. She became a pioneer in the new computer industry, working for IBM as one of its rare women program developers. Thea Spire, who'd escaped from Amsterdam with her affluent family when Hitler's invasion of the Netherlands was imminent, had been kicked out of Sarah Lawrence as an undergraduate, caught kissing a woman, but now she was getting a PhD in psychology from Adelphi University. Spire and Windsor also had in common that they loved to dance. We immediately just fit, our bodies fit, Spire liked to say when she remembered their first meeting and how they danced so long and hard the first night that Windsor wore a hole in her stocking. They were each involved with someone else at the time, so after the meeting at Portofino, for a couple of years, they saw each other only at occasional parties. Their partners would be buttoning coats ready to go home, but Spire and Windsor would seek each other out for one last irresistible dance together. In 1965, they both happened to be single again. When Windsor heard that Spire, who never quite left Windsor's mind, would be spending the weekend at the Hamptons, she got herself invited to the home of friends whom she knew Spire would visit. Spire came by when the friends were out. "Is your dance card full?" Windsor quipped. "It is now," Spire answered, and all that afternoon they made love. 2 years later, Spire, always a romantic, got down on her knees and proposed to Windsor. Windsor said yes before Spire could finish the poetic speech she'd composed. Same-sex couples couldn't get married anywhere in 1967, but Spire wanted to buy Windsor a diamond engagement ring. "How can I wear it at IBM?" Windsor asked. She got along fine with her co-workers, but always turned down their invitations, such as going to weekend wine tastings, because she didn't dare bring Spire. An engagement ring would have prompted questions she knew she couldn't answer honestly in an era when people lost jobs if they were found to be gay or lesbian. So instead of a ring, Spire gave her a diamond brooch, which Windsor wore on her lapel even 45 years later, when her picture was appearing in newspapers and magazines all over the globe. Thea Spire was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1977. She was 45 years old. The disease was progressive. First, she needed a cane to walk, then 2 canes, then she was confined to a wheelchair. Finally, she became quadriplegic. Through it all, she continued to work as a psychotherapist, seeing clients in the 8th floor apartment on Lower Fifth Avenue where she and Windsor lived. In the last years of her life, Spire required oxygen to breathe and Hoyer lifts and slings to get in and out of bed. Though she and Windsor couldn't make the in sickness and in health vow legally, they'd made it anyway to each other. When it became mostly in sickness, Windsor took early retirement at IBM to be able to minister full-time to her lover. But even in sickness, they didn't stop dancing. Windsor on Spire's lap, the two of them twirling in the motorized wheelchair. Windsor liked to remember that they were never on the dance floor together when they didn't scream out to each other above the music, "I love you!" Spire's multiple sclerosis became complicated by heart disease. In 2007, she was told by her doctor she probably had less than a year to live. She was 75 years old, but what she wanted in 1967, she still wanted. When the doctor left the examination room after breaking the news, Spire turned to Windsor and asked, "Do you still want to get married?" Windsor did, very much. She'd attended a meeting of the Human Rights Campaign at New York's LGBT Center, and during the Q&A, she'd asked when the organization would seriously start pushing for marriage. The speaker told her that it was on the agenda for the future. "I'm 77 years old," Windsor shouted. "I can't wait." Same-sex marriage was legal in Massachusetts, but that didn't do Spire and Windsor much good because Massachusetts had a residency requirement to move their household and all the equipment Spire needed to stay alive to another state when she was facing imminent death. It would have been impossible. But marriage was also legal in Canada. All that was required there before you could get a license was a one-day visa. Spire and Windsor knew what they must do. 6 friends, 2 best men, and 4 best women agreed to do it with them. On May 22, 2007, they flew to Toronto, lugging duffel bags with tools to dismantle and put together again Spire's motorized wheelchair, which couldn't be driven onto the small plane. The 2 men carried her to her seat on the plane and, once landed, carried her off the plane to her reassembled wheelchair. Spire, still a handsome woman, sitting tall in her wheelchair, and Windsor perched on the arm of the chair, decked out in pearls, her beautifully coiffed hair, still platinum blonde, thanks to Clairol now, were married by Canada's first openly gay judge, Harvey Brownstone. Windsor and Spire had agreed they wanted to make the ceremony as traditional as possible. They wanted to say, "With this ring I thee wed." When Spire was to say it, her arm had to be lifted by 2 of the best women so she could hold up the ring. Windsor slipped her finger through it. When they got back to New York, Spire said happily, "I can die now because it's completed." She died in their home on February 5, 2009. A week later, Edie Windsor had a heart attack. Stress cardiomyopathy, the doctor called it. Windsor called it a broken heart. Though she recovered, her problems were far from over. New York still didn't allow same-sex marriages, though in 2008 the state had started recognizing those performed elsewhere. But the federal government did not. Not long after Spire's death, Windsor received an estate tax bill from the IRS. As far as the federal law was concerned, she'd inherited from Spire half the value of the apartment, pardon me, and the little cottage that the 2 women had bought in the Hamptons. To the federal government, she and Thea Spire, despite their 40-plus year history, despite their legal marriage, were no more than strangers to each other. The estate tax bill was for $363,053. Windsor had no choice but to pay it. To do that, she had to sell investment bonds that she'd counted on to see her through for the rest of her life. After paying, she figured she had enough left to live on for no more than 4 years. If she'd been married to a Theo instead of a Thea, she knew, she'd have had to pay no estate taxes whatsoever, not even if she'd met and married Theo the month before he died. Windsor called Lambda Legal Defense and Education Group. And I want to, let me just read another paragraph of this and then I'll skip a bit. Sorry, it's the wrong time in the movement to bring up a case like this, Windsor says a Lambda lawyer told her. None of the rights groups was interested in her case. Lawyer Mary Bonato, deservedly revered for her pioneering same-sex marriage successes in Vermont and Massachusetts and dubbed the Thurgood Marshall of the same-sex marriage movement, had warned LGBT lawyers back in 2004 that they mustn't rush into federal court to challenge DOMA with a case about some, quote, wealthy individual who had to pay a tax bill because the federal government wouldn't recognize his or her same-sex marriage. I can't think of a less sympathetic prospect, Bonato had said. But as it turned out, it was a very good case. Edie Windsor went to a wonderful lawyer who was in private practice, Roberta Kaplan, and Roberta Kaplan understood why this was a powerful case, why after all of these years of devotion and service to the woman she loved and a marriage that was recognized in the state where she lived, Edie Windsor should not have to pay a huge federal tax bill that heterosexually married couples would never have to pay. So I'm just going to read one more section. Windsor, with Roberta Kaplan arguing her case, won in the U.S. District Court, and the Republican majority in Congress decided that they would challenge the win, and they used our money, they used taxpayers' money to hire a lawyer, a right-wing lawyer, Paul Clement, to appeal the case to the Supreme Court. But by now, America had really changed in important ways. President Obama had not only repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, he'd come out in favor of same-sex marriage, and that helped to change public opinion hugely. And for the first time, polls showed that most Americans were saying that same-sex couples should indeed be allowed to get married, and their marriage should be treated under the law just as heterosexual marriages were treated. So finally, I'm going to pick up with what happened at the Supreme Court. On June 26, 2013, Justice Anthony Kennedy delivered the majority opinion. DOMA writes inequality into the entire U.S. Code, he declared. It singles out a subset of people and makes them unequal. It disparages and injures those whom the state, by its marriage laws, sought to protect in personhood and dignity. It humiliates tens of thousands of children now being raised by same-sex couples. What the decision meant was that not only would married same-sex couples be treated by the IRS as their heterosexual counterparts were treated, but also that they could get Social Security and veteran survivor benefits, they could hold on to their homes when widowed, they could get green cards for an alien spouse, they were eligible for over 1,000 other benefits that only straight couples had enjoyed before. So I'm going to stop reading now and take your questions. Thank you.